Hello everyone and welcome to Engla Pro. I'm Mo. Let's continue by seeing how you should actually approach the IELTS writing in order to get 6. Well, generally there are 4 types of task 2 questions, and this is the same in general and academic. I mean, the type of questions are the same, and in each exam you just have one of these 4 types. The only difference is that in the academic test, the length of the questions are more. I mean, the questions are longer and the topics are more academic, while in the general test, the length is shorter and the topics are mostly about everyday societal issues. Let's go through the first type, and we are going to see how you can actually write in order to get 6. Let's begin with the first type. The first type of questions are agree or disagree questions. These questions usually have a premise, and then there is a question. What is a premise? The premise is the main topic that is given to the candidates to write about. Sometimes it has one part or idea, and sometimes more than one part or idea. And there are the main questions that sometimes you have, do you agree or disagree? Sometimes you have, to what extent do you agree or disagree? Basically, there isn't much difference between these two, and it is easier to completely agree or completely disagree with the topic. It's easier to write. You can say that in some situations I agree with it and in some situations I don't, but this makes your writing more difficult. For getting 6, it is easier to mention that you completely agree or you completely disagree with this idea, and there isn't any difference between these two. Let's take a look at 2 examples. First, look at this question. Some people think that introducing children to team sports is the best way to teach children teamwork. Do you agree or disagree? Well, the first part, from some to teamwork, is the premise. This is the main idea that is given to you, and you should mention whether you agree or disagree with this idea. Let's take a look at another one. Some people think the best way to solve global environmental problems is to increase the cost of fuel. To what extent do you agree or disagree? You see, this is the first part. This is the premise that is mentioned. And to what extent do you agree or disagree? You can completely agree or you can completely disagree, or you can mention that under some circumstances I agree and under other situations I don't agree. But remember that the second approach is more difficult. So what I'm going to teach you here is the first one, to agree completely or to disagree completely. Now let's talk about the way that the paragraphs in this type of writing should be organized so that you can get 6. Well, you should write 4 paragraphs, 1 introduction, 2 body paragraphs, or some people call them central paragraphs, and 1 conclusion. Well, in the introduction, you should paraphrase the question. By paraphrasing the question, I mean you should reword the question with synonyms, antonyms, and a new grammar. You should state the idea that is in the premise of the question, and then you should express your view, whether you agree or disagree with that. Then you should have 2 body paragraphs. In each body paragraph, you should state 1 reason why you agree or why you disagree with the idea in the premise. And in the conclusion, by referring to your reasons in the form of phrases, restate your view. I mean, you had 1 reason in body paragraph 1 and 1 reason in body paragraph 2. You should make them 2 small phrases. You should say, because of A and B, I agree or I disagree with the idea of whatever that is actually mentioned in the question. We're going to have an example on the next slides. You will see how this is actually done. Here we're going to take a look at an example question, and then we are going to do a brainstorming of the ideas related to this topic. I will tell you what I mean by brainstorming. And then on the next slide, we will take a look at an example for this topic, and you will see how you should write in order to get 6. Well, let's begin. Well, this is a question that you've already seen. Let's read it again. Some people think the best way to solve global environmental problems is to increase the cost of fuel. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Well, it is a good idea that before you start writing, you start writing down your own ideas. If you agree, what would be your reasons? If you disagree, what would be your reasons for disagreement? This is called brainstorming. It means before starting your actual writing, you should just write down your ideas on a piece of paper. You can write it in your first language or in English or any other languages. It doesn't really matter. The point is that you just write down your ideas so that you can decide whether you should agree or you should disagree. Sometimes it's easier to agree with something, sometimes it's easier to disagree with something. You should see which one you can write better. Well, if I were you, I would pause the video right now for a while, for 1 or 2 minutes. I would think about this topic and then I would write down my ideas first, okay? And then replay the video and see what I've done. Now I'm going to tell you what my ideas are. So is it the best way really to solve the global environmental problems? Well, if I want to agree with this, I have these ideas and I can use them. Encouraging renewable energy, reducing fuel consumption, lowering pollution, and then promoting fuel efficiency. These are the reasons that I can mention if I want to agree with this idea. For disagreeing, I can say having negative impact on poor people, having limited effect, not being the major source of pollution. I mean that the fuel of cars is not really the major source of pollution. These are the ideas that I've written down. Maybe you have some other ideas as well. I've just written some here. Out of these ideas, I guess it's easier for me to disagree with this idea. So you will see the example on the next slide. Now let's read the sample writing, and we will go over that paragraph by paragraph. But first, let's look at the question again. The question is, some people think the best way to solve global environmental problems is to increase the cost of fuel. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Well, we mentioned on the previous slide that we are going to disagree with this topic. Well, this is the introduction. Some people believe raising fuel price is the best solution to fix environmental problems around the world. While this idea might help reduce fuel usage, I personally disagree that this is the best solution. As you remember, first we mentioned that we should paraphrase the question here. We have done that in the first part. Let me just mention it from here, from some people to the world. And I've used some synonyms in order to paraphrase it. For example, to solve has become to fix, global has become around the world, and to increase the cost of fuel has become raising fuel price. You see, I've tried to use synonyms to paraphrase this question, this idea, this premise. And then, as we said, we should mention our own idea. I personally disagree that this is the best solution. This is my own idea that I've mentioned in the introduction. Now I have to bring 2 reasons why I disagree with this opinion. First of all, increasing the price of fuel makes life more difficult for many people, especially those with low income. This is my first reason, and from here up to the end of the paragraph, I should elaborate on this. I should clarify what I exactly mean by this reason. In many countries, people need cars to go to work or take their children to school because public transportation is not efficient. If fuel becomes too expensive, they may not be able to afford it. This is not fair because the rich can still drive easily while the poor should suffer more. The next reason, additionally, the biggest reason for environmental problems is not the fuel that is used by cars. Big industrial factories are producing the major share of the pollution. This is my second reason. And from here, I will elaborate on that again. It is easy to see that all around industrial areas, there is too much pollution in any form. These factories pollute the air we breathe and the water we drink through their runoff into rivers and the sea. For instance, this can be easily seen near industrial parks in many parts of the world. If we focus on fuel prices, we ignore this larger problem. A better way is for the government to invest in clean energy, recycle more, and make companies follow environmental rules. Now we should go to the conclusion. In conclusion, we should state our opinion again by referring to the two reasons that we have already mentioned in the central paragraphs. Take a look. In conclusion, I strongly believe that increasing fuel costs is not the best way to solve global environmental problems. This was the repetition of the idea, and it makes life harder for normal people and does not stop the major causes of pollution. These are the two reasons that are discussed in central paragraph. And the final sentence that is something not necessary, but I've written it here just to make it more beautiful, is this: governments should find other more fair and effective ways to protect the planet. It's a good idea if you read this text a few times and try to analyze it for yourself. When you want to present your reasons in central paragraphs, there are some things that you should consider. Well, you shouldn't write any statistics. We never write a research at the University of Oxford shows that 20% of lung cancer is due to smoking. This is not good. No authoritative statements. I mean sentences by authorities, scientists. Psychologists believe that anxiety is bad for people. This is what psychologists think. But here we want your own arguments. So how should you organize your argument? Well, first of all, you should state your reason in one sentence. Then you should expand that in 2 or 3 sentences. And then, if possible, you should exemplify that in 1 or 2 sentences. So your paragraph should be at least 4 or 5 sentences long. We don't have paragraphs that are 1 or 2 sentences long. And another point is that you should directly mention your reason in the first sentence. You shouldn't have another introduction in central paragraphs. You directly mention your reason in the first sentence. Here we're going to take a look at some useful expressions that can be used in IELTS writing. Let's start with these. When you want to say that you agree with an opinion, you can use these expressions. You can say, for example, I tend to agree with the idea that, and then you have a that clause here, so there should be a full sentence, a subject and a verb. Let's take a look at an example. I tend to agree with the idea that the price of fuel should be increased in order to protect the environment. You see, the price of fuel is the subject, should be increased is the verb, so there is a sentence after that. Or you can say, I subscribe to the view that, means I agree with it. You can see this here. I subscribe to the view that living in big cities has more drawbacks than benefits. Drawbacks means disadvantages and benefits means advantages. If you want to say that you disagree with an opinion, you can use these expressions. I strongly disagree with. For example, I strongly disagree with the new proposal to expand the city. And remember that here we have with, so we need a noun clause after that. So with the new proposal, and this is the noun clause. Also, you can say, I feel I must take issue with, means I should stand against. I feel I must take issue with the way this matter is analyzed. For conclusions, you can say, in conclusion, to summarize and to sum up. There's basically no difference among them. For example, you can say, in conclusion, to summarize or to sum up. One of them is okay. I tend to agree with the idea that women should have the same opportunities as men when it comes to promotion at work. And then when you want to exemplify something, you can say, for example, for instance, is a good example of, means something is a good example of another thing. Let's take a look at an example. Air pollution is a good example of environmental problems we are facing today. And such as or including. These are some useful expressions that can be used in any type of writing in IELTS. Of course, it's good for real life too. Let's summarize what you learned in this lesson. Well, we have 4 different types of task 2 questions. Here we learn the first type, which is agree or disagree. We should answer this type of questions in 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph is the introduction, which contains the paraphrase of the question plus your view, I mean whether you agree or disagree with it. And then we write 2 central paragraphs, which are also called body paragraphs. These 2 contain 2 reasons why you agree or disagree with the topic. And then in the conclusion, you should mention your idea again by referring to those 2 reasons that you discussed in central paragraphs. Remember that your idea should be expressed from the beginning of the writing. This is very, very important for your task response. You shouldn't use statistics or authoritative statements, and then you shouldn't write 1 or 2 sentence long paragraphs. Your paragraphs should be at least 4 or 5 sentences long. You should write as much as you can to make it clear to the reader what you exactly mean. And then I should repeat that you shouldn't start writing as soon as you see the question. You should brainstorm your ideas. You should jot down the ideas that come to your mind, and then you should choose which one is easier to go. I mean, is it easier to agree, or is it easier to disagree? This is very, very important. Sometimes maybe you disagree with something, but it is easier to write it when you agree with it. So you have to choose which one is easier. We want to get a better score in this test, so you should be wise. I hope that you've learned this lesson well. Maybe you should watch this video a couple of times to get exactly what I said here. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write them in the comments. Thank you for watching this video of NCLAB Pro, and hope to see you again. Bye.